This film was made to illustrate oral fluid therapy for cholera and its early implementation into the field. It takes place at the Pakistan Ceto Cholera Research Laboratory, where they treated free of charge all patients with diarrhea and studied how to better treat and prevent cholera. All patients that took part in these studies did so for their own benefit and for their countrymen's benefit. The Motlob Rural Health Center was established in 1966. The health center and the village are connected by this bridge. And here is the British colonial police barge built in 1890 that was home to many, many visitors to Motlob. Two members of the EIS, the Epidemic Intelligence Service, from the Centers for Disease Control participated in this project. One was me, Eli Aberton, that you saw on the previous slide, as I awakened one morning to view a dhow and the mist in the distance. Here is the hospital with the kitchen on the right. The second EIS officer was Dr. John Forrest, seen here. There are two methods for bringing patients with diarrheal disease to the hospital. One was the traditional method, shown here, carrying the patient on a stretcher. And the second is by ambulance, a waterboat ambulance. Several of these were stationed around the edges of the catchment area at Motlob. And if you notice, the right hand of the middle individual has a jug, and this was oral fluid therapy that was taken en route to the hospital. We are now in the local bazaar with Dr. Richard Cash in the center and Dr. Rahman with the black sweater, buying the ingredients for oral fluid therapy. It's important to note that the ingredients could be non-sterile, were readily available in a local bazaar, and were inexpensive. The ingredients included glucose, sodium chloride, sodium bicarbonate, and then in different recipes there were different other chemicals that were included. In any society, it's important to watch where the money goes, and like many other places, there is a third individual who is involved. Here we come back to the laboratory, where at night the packets were prepared. The proper amount of materials was put into small plastic bags using only a chemical scale. To introduce oral fluid therapy to the area, jugs, packets were taken to the villages. The leader was Dr. Aziz, a charismatic individual who helped with implementation. The first step is to introduce oral fluid therapy to the village elders in order to have their approval for use of this treatment. Hospital staff, who were widowers by and large, helped. Here Mr. Aziz explained that you get water from the local water supply and that you prepare the jugs properly. He explains that it's very important to get proper mixing so the concentrations are appropriate, and he asks each of them if they understand. Now he demonstrates. First, some water is taken, put into the The packets are emptied into the jug. Then the jugs are shaken to completely dissolve the chemicals. Two minutes is suggested. Once it's dissolved, additional water is added to fill up the jug completely. It was now important to have everyone taste the material so that there was acceptance of the treatment and a complete understanding of what it involved for the patients, village elders, hospital staff, and anyone who wanted. Mr. Aziz explains that if the patient can't hold the glass and there was a risk of aspiration, then no treatment. On the other hand, if the patient could drink, then it was okay. Do you understand? Do you understand? And do you understand? Here is a father who's coming to the home of the nurse's aides, indicating that his son has cholera. Records were kept by hand of emigrations, births, and deaths, so the census was well understood and correct. The son is ill with cholera, the bucket with oral fluid therapy, and the patient is taken to one of the ambulance sites. Ambulance is on duty all day, every day. And treatment is started on the way to the hospital. These shots suggest that East Pakistan or Bangladesh was a very rural country. However, other shots show that the population density was high. The ambulance arrives at the little river next to the hospital. It's the dry season, so the water is low, the bridge is high, and they arrive at the hospital to continue treatment. The first step in the treatment of cholera is to get a weight. Here is another plaque commemorating the start of the hospital. The son is being weighed with the father. Later, the father will come back and be weighed alone. Here is Eli Aberton with the onset of a severe diarrheal disease, later diagnosed as cholera. I am being placed in the bottom of a waterboat ambulance. A makeshift IV pole is being rigged as he prepares for the 5-hour trip back to Dhaka Hospital. The trip was being made because healthy Westerners don't get cholera, and the diagnosis was not apparent at that time. Dr. Bill McCormick, a third EIS officer, is taking care of the patient. IV is in place, and the ambulance is ready to travel back to DACA. Traditional therapy of cholera requires a cholera cot, methods for measuring output, and intravenous therapy. Today we've added oral fluid therapy to the traditional treatment. Eventually, someday, oral fluid therapy may stand alone. So as the sun sets, and we may be seeing the sun setting on the older treatment of cholera and the dawn of a new day in the treatment of this lethal disease.